What is sheltered instruction? What do you think? Tell me. It's an ESL approach that integrates English language and content instruction. Put simply, sheltered instruction teaches information and English simultaneously. Why do you think it is called sheltered instruction? This approach has been widely used since the 1980s in the United States. When this phrase was coined, English language learners were considered sheltered because they studied in classes separate from the mainstream and did not compete academically with native English-speaking students.
What about you? Have you ever used an approach that mixes English and subject content? Let me know in the comments.
The most popular sheltered instruction model is the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, or SIOP for short. It has teaching and observation components, which is how it derives its name. I won't discuss the observation component today, since it's not especially relevant to the purposes of this video. SIOP was created to help ESL teachers implement consistent and effective instruction across classrooms and schools. The SIOP model has 8 components and 30 features. I will highlight some of the features in this video, but mostly focus on the 8 components. They are lesson preparation, building background, comprehensible input, strategies, interaction, practice and application, lesson delivery, and review or assessment. It's logical to use them in sequence, but keep in mind that certain elements can overlap. The first component is lesson preparation. Preparing a sheltered instruction lesson isn't too different from how you prepare task-based lessons. Think about and determine what your students already know by considering what you have already taught in previous lessons. Also determine the appropriate level of instruction based on the student's English proficiency levels: beginner, intermediate, or advanced. Decide what you need to teach them by identifying language and content objectives for your lesson. Also, identify the key vocabulary words or phrases that students will need to learn and use. Plan meaningful activities that integrate lesson concepts with opportunities for language practice. We plan activities at different levels for our students in task-based lessons, and we should do the same in sheltered instruction. Look at what English language learners at different proficiency levels should be able to do. Beginners can process, understand, produce, or use WH questions, yes or no questions, words, phrases, or chunks, statements with sensory or graphic support, and pictorial or graphic representations of the content. Intermediates can process, understand, produce, or use expanded sentences, spoken or written. Advanced students can process, understand, produce, or use a variety of sentence length with varying complexity in spoken or written discourse. Give information and ask questions at different proficiency levels throughout the lesson so all students can feel included. Let's try it out. Look at the following slide. Earth's water is naturally recycled through a process called the water cycle. For which English proficiency level is the information most appropriate? Beginner, intermediate, or advanced? Yes, the advanced level. You're right. How can we change it to make it more comprehensible for beginners? How would you simplify this sentence for your own students? Tell me. For my lesson, I changed the information into a less complex statement. Earth recycles water through the water cycle. It still may be too complex for some beginners, but this statement is at least simpler. The next slide shows the beginning of my lesson plan that I prepared for my sheltered instruction lesson on the topic of the water cycle. The way I wrote the lesson plan isn't necessarily the official SIOP format, but I modified the lesson plan template I use at my school to include the SIOP components. When writing the content and language objectives for a SIOP lesson, consider what you want the students to learn. Are they learning about the solar system, the parts of a plant, the steps of the water cycle, or the steps in the process of making ice cream? Also, decide what the students should be able to do with the information. For example, draw a picture, match, point to, identify, write, name, explain, act out, label. Finally, include the language or language skills that the students will learn to help them read, write, speak, or listen in English. For example, verb tenses, vocabulary words, transitions, conjunctions, types of sentences, prepositions. Separating content and language objectives is often not very easy to do. Let's practice identifying content and language objectives. Take a look at this slide. What do you think? Which of these objectives is the language objective and which is the content objective? Students accurately draw a picture of the water cycle is the content objective because it doesn't require the students to use English. Students use the key vocabulary words to accurately label a picture of the water cycle is the language objective because the student must be able to read and write in English. Component 2 of the SIOP model is building background. Explicitly help students make connections to the new content by starting the lesson with what they already know. This can be done by questioning. For example, a teacher might ask, "What do you see in this picture?" or "What is this?" Building background also includes direct vocabulary instruction. Teach the key vocabulary needed to understand the lesson. Take a look at the portion of my sheltered instruction lesson that I use to teach the key vocabulary: vapor, liquid, and frozen water. You can also ask the question, how can you use water to help students build background knowledge by making connections to what they already know. The third component of the SIOP model is comprehensible unit. This comes from Stephen Krashen's theory of second language acquisition in the 1980s. His main idea is simple. Students learn best when they understand most of what they hear or read, but are also challenged with a little bit of new language, what he called I+1. For example, if a student understands basic sentences, the teacher adds slightly harder ones with new words or structures. This way, students keep moving forward without being overwhelmed. Think about your own class. What's one example of I+1 language you have used with your students? Tell me. I have a separate video about Krashen's method on my channel. Let me give you an example. I'll give you 2 quick lessons in a language you have probably never heard before. Lithuanian. Please tell me which lesson is easier to understand. Lesson number 1. Sveiki, brangieji. Šiandienos pamokos tema yra kūno dalis. Jūs išmoksite, kaip lietuviškai vadinti 6 kūno dalis ir aš norėčiau pradėti nuo paprasčiausio žodžio ranka. Ar galite man parodyti savo rankas? Ar visi suprantate, apie ką aš čia kalbu? What do you think? Is it a good lesson? Do you think if I kept talking to you like that, you would pick up Lithuanian? No? Here's lesson number 2. Kas tai yra? Ranka. Ranka. Viena ranka. Rankos. Rankos. Dvi rankos. Akis. Viena akis. 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 Dvi akis. Akiniai. If you understood lesson number 2, I did everything necessary to teach you Lithuanian. According to Krashen, we acquire a language when we understand the messages. When I teach, I put everything in context. I assault my students' senses by being visual, kinesthetic, loud and quiet, but most importantly, I make language learning enjoyable and natural by providing input that my students can understand without too much struggle. In my water cycle lesson, I made the following information comprehensible by including pictures with each word. The 4th component is called strategies. This component can be separated into 2 categories: teaching strategies and learning strategies. One example of teaching strategies is scaffolding. We all already use this strategy in our current lessons. Some examples of scaffolding for a sheltered instruction lesson include modeling, graphic organizers, sentence frames or structures, and first language. A second teaching strategy is encouraging higher order thinking through questioning. For this strategy, think about Bloom's taxonomy. For more on these concepts, check out my videos, one on scaffolding strategies and another on Bloom's taxonomy. All the links are in the description below the video. Examples of learning strategies include taking notes, finding key vocabulary, predicting, and questioning, where the student asks the questions. In my lesson, I asked the question, why don't lakes overflow? To encourage the students to use critical thinking. I also asked my students to make a prediction about what would happen next in the water cycle. The 5th component of the SIOP model is called interaction. A main feature of interaction is to reduce teacher talk time to increase student talk time. Teachers should also plan activities that require students to work cooperatively. An obvious way to do that is by planning games, which we all already do in our lessons. Also, plan activities that allow students to interact with the teacher. Remember to give students adequate wait time to answer questions. Interaction is an integral component of a lesson because studies show that we learn 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 70% of what is discussed with others, 80% of what we experience personally, and 90% of what we teach others. What is your go-to activity for getting students to talk more than you? Tell me. An activity that I planned for my lesson is called Stand Up, Clap, Sit Down. I use this activity to reinforce the vocabulary frozen water, liquid water, and water vapor. The students have to stand every time they see a picture of liquid water, clap every time they see a picture of frozen water, and sit every time they see water vapor. Another activity that I planned is called Secret Letters. I ask the students, how long is the water cycle process? Each student has to think about the question, then write their chosen letter on a mini whiteboard or piece of paper to show their guess. I also included a team challenge as a cooperative activity. Split the class into teams of 4 or more, depending on the class size. Ask your students to work in teams to draw the water cycle on mini whiteboards or in their notebooks. Click on the 2-minute timer to activate it. Once all teams are finished, reveal the picture of the water cycle. Check each drawing and award points accordingly. The 6th component is practice or application. Plan activities that allow students to use the new content and language learned during the lesson. Examples include worksheets, games, songs or chants, and graphic organizers or charts. In my lesson, I included a music video that used the new vocabulary taught during my lesson. Want to hear it?
The sun shines bright, the water warms. It changes shape, that's how it forms. From liquid up into the air. Evaporation happens there. The vapor cools, the drops combine. Condensation's next in line. The water cycle round and round. From the sky down to the ground. Evaporation, condensation. Precipitation, what a sensation. The clouds get full, they let it go. Precipitation, rain or snow. It could be sleet, it could be hail. The cycle story never.
After that, distribute the closed worksheet and play the song again. Students should fill in the missing words as they listen. The seventh component is lesson delivery. This component definitely overlaps with lesson preparation. The features included with lesson delivery are to support the content and language objectives, promote student engagement, and appropriately pace the lesson. I won't go into more detail about lesson delivery because I think these are all things we already know how to do. The eighth component of the SIOP model is called review and evaluation. Teachers should review the content and key vocabulary, create opportunities to give students feedback on their language output, and assess student learning and comprehension of all the lesson objectives. Evaluation can be a formal or informal assessment. Informal assessments are used to give students the opportunity to retrieve newly learned information, which increases the likelihood that they will remember the content. I included a little quiz in the form of a game for my sheltered instruction lesson. A student from each team answers the question. The fastest wins and gets to choose a letter. Each letter hides a score, 1, 3, or 5. The water cycle lesson is available for sale at my stores on Teachers Pay Teachers or the Teacher Val Store. As a bonus, Teacher Val Store customers will also receive an exclusive 3-page detailed lesson plan and a close song activity handout. Check out the links in the description below for more details. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Your likes and comments help more teachers find my videos and support the growth of this channel. Thank you and happy teaching.